So in last week's gospel, you guys heard the story where Peter declares that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of the living God. And this was a huge revelation to Peter and to the disciples. But this week, this text follows directly after that one. Just as quickly as he was praised by Jesus a few short verses ago, now he gets scolded. Jesus says, "Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me, for you are setting your mind not on divine things, but on human things." He was just the rock upon which the church is founded, and now he's the rock that Jesus trips on. Poor Peter. He was the best, and this week he's Satan. So what happened? Now, Messiah is a word that has many meanings. But most commonly back then, when the Jewish people were waiting for what we call a kingly Messiah, a ruler like King David, a strong warrior who would lead armies and overthrow the oppressive Roman government and free the Israelites. This was a leader who would guide these chosen people to freedom like Moses. And this is most likely what Peter thought Jesus was going to be. So, when Peter learns that Jesus will instead be rejected and killed, he is understandably heartbroken. All of his hopes and dreams are shattered. If Jesus dies, he cannot save them from their Gentile oppressors. So he tells Jesus that he must be wrong. No God would do that to us. Peter here is speaking out of grief. Grief for the future that he imagined that will now not come to pass. Jesus will not be crowned king on earth. Rather, he will be killed. And this isn't all Peter's fault. We kind of give Peter all the blame. As David Lowes explains, quote, "The problem with Peter's expectation is not that it's unreasonable, but that doesn't change anything. Rome is there enforced by violence. Jesus, the warrior king, uses greater force and violence to drive them out. Eventually, someone with even more force and willing to do greater violence takes over yet again. Who's in charge may change, but the wheel of force and violence keeps revolving," end quote. So instead of that, Jesus offers something different. He challenges the system and gives them mercy, forgiveness, and love, instead of revenge and hate and violence, because that is the only way to stop the cycle. When Jesus rebukes Peter, he isn't just rebuking him, but he's rebuking the whole world, the whole system. Peter was thinking about a powerful Messiah, and to him, that meant someone with political power, with strength and force, with popularity, who was a ruler, Emperor Jesus. Now those are the values of the world, back then and still today. Right? We know might makes right. And all those who have the wealth and power win. And people think that value comes from how much money you have, or how many cars, or how big your house is, or how many people you manage at work. And Peter thought that too, except for the cars part. Maybe donkeys, I don't know. But Jesus invites us here to think of our worth in a different way. Our worth does not come from our accomplishments or our possessions. It is a gift from God. Jesus wants us to know that our possessions and our wealth don't define who we are. Our identity comes from the fact that we are children of God, and life is much more than a competition or a rat race. So they wanted a strong warrior Messiah, and instead they got a poor carpenter's son, a traveling preacher, a troublemaker, who eventually gets crushed by the government. That is the key to having Jesus be the Son of the living God. He's the Son of the living God. It's the life part. In many ways, we still want God to be that strong warrior, right? We want God to vanquish our foes and solve all of our problems for us and save us from tragedy. But that's not what we get. Instead, we get a call to service, to do some work. Here, Jesus tells us we have to take up the cross and serve God ourselves. We are called into this story as participants, not onlookers. And taking up the cross does not mean putting yourself on the cross. That's different. You know that phrase that we say, and usually like this, we all have our crosses to bear. Well, that phrase has a negative connotation, right? And sometimes people will seek out a cross to bear in order to seem more pious. But that's not what bearing the cross means. Bearing the cross is not a burden, as that phrase infers. It's a privilege. Bearing the cross means knowing God's love and spreading that love, living out the mission that Jesus gives us, not suffering for no reason. Bearing our cross means that we know that wealth and power and authority are not what make us great or good people. Those things don't define us. Our identity comes from God. God who loves and God who blesses, who is living now through us. Now, it's really hard to take up the cross in this way. It's hard because we have to reject so much of what society, the outside world, tells us. We have to ignore that constant noise that's telling us if we were just a little more rich or a little more beautiful or a little more thin or a little more, just more, then we'll be happy and perfect. We have to reverse that and know what true honor is and know what true blessing is. Even Paul, who is often harsh and gets a bad reputation for being mean, agrees. In this portion of Romans, one of the letters we know for sure that Paul wrote, he says, "Let love be genuine, hate what is evil, hold fast to what is good. Love one another with mutual affection." And then he says, "Live in harmony with one another. Do not be haughty, but associate with the lowly. Do not claim to be wiser than you are. Do not repay someone evil for evil, but take thought for what is noble in the sight of all." I don't think that can be any more clear. I don't have to explain that one. So at the news of Jesus' impending death, poor Peter's little heart breaks. And it breaks because his friend and leader will die. And it breaks also because all his hopes for the world were resting on this idea he had of a kingly Messiah, Emperor Jesus, someone who would swoop in with all his promises and fix all the problems of the world for him, ruling from on high. But alas, Jesus is not like that. Sometimes our hearts have to break so that they can be changed, so that they can be made new and stronger and fortified by the love of God. A love that is stronger than fear, sin, and even death. And that's the promise that we get in the story today and every day. Our enemies probably won't all be cut down, and all of our wishes won't be granted. What we thought our lives would be like won't always come to pass, but we will always have love and grace from God, and that is our cross to bear. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.